Hi, I'm Dr. Eric. This is my Rock the Drill tip of the day on how I make an upper anterior disc with a lower slider using D3 Splint. Enjoy. So first we're going to do is open D3 Splint and import our STL files. Once we do so, we're going to click on which arch we're picking. We'll click the opposing. Then we're going to set our landmarks, and you really just follow the prompts. Now, once we set the landmarks, we're going to get our articulator, and if we haven't given a leaf gauge bite, we're going to open our pin 5 or 6 millimeters, enough to give about 2 to 3 millimeters of space in the back, depending on what material you're using to make your night guard. So we're going to capture the view and then commit for our path of insertion. Once we do that, we have to make sure that we save our model. Won't let you proceed without doing so. You typically won't ever go back to this, because if something happens you would start over, but it does make you do it anyway. Now we're going to create the refractory model. The undercut is how much it's engaging under the heights of contour. Offset is how tight it is against the model, so you can change those numbers if you want to make it tighter or looser. I like to keep it pretty tight because I'm using a soft key splint material, which is heat moldable. At this point we're drawing the perimeter, and again I'm going above all the heights of contour, and this is going to get a lot of engagement but I can do that because I'm using a thermoplastic material that you can heat up before the patient puts it in their mouth. If you're using a rigid material, you need something you can't engage so much. Once we marked it, we're going to select that splint margin for the perimeter, confirm it, and at that point it's making the splint shell, and right now it's in progress. Now we're going to view the splint. Once we view it, we can start hiding some of the things that we don't need, and we're going to want to click right around the incisive papilla area, click on the deprogrammer, and then it's going to set it right wherever we put that bullseye. And at this point we can set it against either the lower teeth or where we think the lower shell is going to be. In this case I'm going to create about a 1.5 millimeter shell, so I'm going to leave about 1.5 millimeters space in between here. And I'm just double checking the final position. Once I'm happy, I'm going to click fuse. And then you just want to use some of the tools to really smooth the edges and block out any undercuts. And it's all pretty standard. So on the left side next, we'll block out the concavities, remesh and smooth, and you'll just see it looks a little bit cleaner after these steps. Once I do this, I like to kind of shorten the cuss tips, and I'll use the smooth tool. And that's just going to mean I can get away with a smaller vertical opening without having to worry about cuss tips rubbing against each other in the back. Finish, and once we're done with that, if we were going to print with a rigid material, I'll use a raft. If I'm using a softer material, I'm going to just go ahead and print using supports. And if you look on the inside, it looks nice and clean, like a good impression. We know everything finalized properly. Now it will export whatever is labeled as final splint. So once you export it, it's important to save this file, because later if you need to re-export it, you have to have this initial shell saved. Because when you plan the opposing will then, the slider I should say, will now become the final splint when you finish it. So at this point it's like we're starting a second splint. So basically it's going to follow the same prompts. We're going to set the opposing, set the splint model. In this case the splint model will be the bottom, and the opposing is actually going to be the upper deprogrammer. So again, we're capture, view, and commit to the path of insertion. Survey the model, and we're going to use the same numbers we did before, again because I like those parameters. And as you can see, we're going to recreate that refractory model and then remark the splint shell. And the refractory model basically is the model with the undercuts taken into consideration. And that's when you change those undercut settings, it's changing those heights of contours and the tightness of the fit. And if there's any areas in red, you would click Connect Endpoints. I tend to do it anyway. Then you'll pick the interior. As long as you see two different colors, you're good to proceed. And you can see it's thinking. Again, it's pretty much fully automated. So at this point, we're almost done. We're not finalized yet, so that's why the underside of the new splint doesn't look really crisp yet. That happens once we hit finalize. So we're going to do the same thing, block out any concavities, sculpt, get rid of those little cusp tips. Once again, just to prevent any posterior interferences. If you're going to have any problems with one of these deprogrammers, it's typically posterior interferences or excess translation. And the reason I go full arch now is just to prevent any supra-eruption. I don't really believe it's usually that's the cause of anterior open bites. It's usually something going on with the joint, but just to kind of cover my butt, I started going full arch since I have such thin materials in the back now. I don't have to over open the bite. So once we go ahead and finalize, I want to make sure again, once we get to this step, we do save everything after we export it, just in case we need to later go back in and change the fit. And if you need to change a fit, you would just change the refractory model settings, but I'm not going to put that in this video just for time purposes. Once this is exported, they do export in the proper like spatial settings, so we can use these files if we wanted to make a mandibular advancement device. And there you go, picking the same settings as before. And you can make, like I said, a mandibular advancement device by adding these buttons. These are set at 19 millimeters apart, so you can take this, and if you decided to, optionally add 19 millimeters, and then you can titrate this case by changing the size of the elastics. I took this bite using a pharyngometer, so I know I wanted to be 6 mil edge to edge in this case, but it is neat that I can titrate forward if I want to. And if I want to ditch the elastics, then I just have a standard night guard. So it's a pretty neat workflow, and I'm having pretty good success with it. So enjoy.